The guests had barely settled into their seats when the feeling hit him, that strange heaviness in a room where everyone smiled but something was undeniably wrong. Weddings were supposed to be filled with warmth, laughter, and celebration. But here, beneath the glittering lights of the Oak Ridge Country Hall, silence clung to one corner like a forgotten truth. It was the corner where a young woman in a wheelchair sat completely alone. Her name was Aubrey Callahan, daughter of billionaire CEO Robert Callahan, and the only person in the room pretending not to notice the way people avoided looking at her. The wedding belonged to her cousin. The joy belonged to everyone else. Aubrey sat still, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the floor as if it hurt too much to look at the aisle she wouldn't get to walk down. A pale lavender dress draped her legs, the fabric gathered gently around the footrests of her wheelchair. She had done her hair herself, tiny curls pinned with silver clips, but no one had complimented her. No one dared. She wasn't part of the celebration. She was the family tragedy they hoped would stay quiet. And nothing about her presence was louder than the absence of kindness. That was when Evan Brooks entered the hall, guiding his 7-year-old daughter, Nora, by the hand. He wasn't the kind of man who fit naturally into rooms filled with wealth. His suit was neat but simple, sleeves slightly wrinkled from comforting Nora in the car. His late wife's aunt had invited him, insisting he come, for family's sake, even though he barely knew the bride. Evan didn't care about the gold-rimmed plates or towering floral arrangements. His attention was pulled somewhere else immediately. "Daddy," Nora whispered, tugging his sleeve. "Why is that girl sitting all by herself?" Evan followed her gaze. Aubrey. Alone. Forgotten. He didn't answer at first. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because the truth was too painful to serve a child. "Maybe people just got busy," he said softly. But Nora didn't buy it. Kids rarely accepted excuses when they sensed unfairness. The music shifted, signaling the ceremony was about to begin. The crowd rose to its feet as the bride stepped into view, the picture of beauty and privilege. Camera flashes burst like fireflies. Everyone faced forward. Everyone except Aubrey. She stayed seated. Not because she chose to, she simply wasn't included when the usher invited close family to stand. Nora tugged Evan's sleeve again. "Daddy," she looked sad. Evan glanced down at his daughter's earnest face, then back at Aubrey. Her shoulders curled inward, her chin tucked low. She looked like someone trying to disappear into the soft folds of her dress. Before Evan could react, Nora slipped from his grasp and walked straight toward Aubrey. "Nora!" Evan hissed, reaching for her, but she was already halfway there. Several heads turned. A few whispered disapprovingly. After all, no one approached Aubrey. Not even her own family. Aubrey blinked, startled to see a small girl suddenly standing in front of her. "Hi," Nora said in the loud whisper children use when they think they're being polite. "I'm Nora. What's your name?" Aubrey stared at her, confused. People didn't talk to her without being prompted. "Aubrey," she whispered. "You're really pretty," Nora declared. "Why aren't you sitting with everybody?" Aubrey's breath caught. No one had asked her that directly. Not once. "I'm fine here," she murmured. "But you're alone." The words landed like a stone dropped into deep water. Evan reached them, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," he said gently, kneeling beside Aubrey. "She didn't mean to." Aubrey cut him off quietly. "She's fine." "Really?" Her voice trembled, but not with fear, something closer to shock. A child had noticed her. A child had reached for her when grown adults went out of their way to pretend she wasn't there. Evan offered a small smile, soft and apologetic. "If Nora is bothering you, I'll take her back." Aubrey shook her head quickly. "She's not bothering me." Nora climbed onto the chair beside Aubrey's wheelchair, swinging her legs happily. "Can I sit here with you for the wedding?" Aubrey hesitated only a moment before whispering, "I'd like that." Evan stood slowly, noticing the bride's mother frowning from several rows up. Some guests whispered again. A few shook their heads. The Callahan family was particular about appearances. But Evan ignored them. He had seen the loneliness in Aubrey's eyes. The kind that didn't come from isolation, it came from being unwanted. As the bride and groom exchanged vows, Aubrey finally lifted her gaze. Not because she felt included, but because Nora kept whispering questions like, "Do you think her dress is scratchy?" and "Why is everyone crying already?" until Aubrey had to cover her mouth to hide her laughter. It was the first time she'd smiled in hours. Maybe days. When the ceremony ended and guests moved toward the reception hall, Aubrey stayed back, waiting for the aisle to empty. Her father, Robert Callahan, passed her without looking directly at her. "Don't fall behind," he muttered. "They're waiting to take family photos." Family photos. Aubrey didn't say it, but she knew she wouldn't be in any of them. Not anymore. The accident had changed more than her ability to walk. It had broken something in her father he'd never bothered to heal. It was easier for him to pretend she wasn't part of the picture than to face his guilt head-on. Evan saw the exchange. He recognized distance when he saw it, the kind that wounds more deeply than words. When Aubrey tried to will herself toward the reception hall, the small slope in the walkway made her chair roll backward. She tried again, arms trembling with effort. Before she could strain again, Evan stepped forward. "May I help you?" he asked softly. Aubrey froze, startled. "No one usually," she stopped, swallowing. "Sure. Thank you." Nora held the side of the wheelchair as Evan gently guided Aubrey up the incline. Aubrey looked back at him, her eyes soft with something he didn't quite recognize yet, gratitude mixed with disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered again. "You don't have to thank me," Evan said. "Anyone would help." Aubrey gave him a sad, brief smile. "Not anyone." Inside the reception hall, chandeliers sparkled like captured stars, and the air buzzed with chatter. But the moment Aubrey entered, the atmosphere shifted. Just slightly. Just enough for her to feel it. Several people's conversations paused. A bridesmaid adjusted her posture so Aubrey wouldn't appear in her photos. Someone else moved their chair a few inches, not enough to be obvious, but enough to send a message. Aubrey kept her gaze low, trying to ignore the tiny stings. She was used to it. Too used to it. Nora wasn't. "Daddy," she whispered loudly, "why does everyone look at Aubrey like that?" More heads turned. Aubrey felt her cheeks heat. "It's fine," she murmured. But Evan knew it wasn't. He leaned down to Nora. "Remember what we talked about? Sometimes people forget how to be kind. And it's our job to remember." Aubrey heard him. Her fingers tightened around the armrest of her wheelchair. Robert Callahan, her father, appeared near the head table. His expression froze when he spotted her with Evan and Nora. "Aubrey," he said, his tone clipped. "Come sit with the family." Aubrey glanced behind him. There was no seat for her. Not near the front. Not near the cameras. Just the same lonely table at the far end of the hall where they placed her at every event since the accident. "Dad," she whispered, "there's no place for my chair up there." Robert stiffened. "We discussed this. We needed symmetry for the photos." Evan felt a flare of anger rise in his chest. Nora frowned at Robert. "She's part of your family," she said simply. The directness stunned him. A silence fell around them. Aubrey's breath trembled. "I'll sit in the back," she said softly. "It's fine." But Evan wasn't letting that happen. Not again. "Actually," he said, guiding Nora to a nearby empty table, "you're welcome to sit with us, if you'd like." Aubrey stared at him, shocked. "Really?" "Really," Evan said warmly. No rules about symmetry over here. Something inside Aubrey cracked open, something fragile and long ignored. She smiled. A real smile. "I'd like that," she whispered. Robert opened his mouth as if to argue, but the bride distracted him with a request. He turned away. Aubrey rolled her wheelchair to Evan's table, and he helped reposition her so she wasn't pushed into a corner. Nora sat beside her, chatting about the cake flavors and the flower arrangements. For the first time all evening, Aubrey felt human. Present. Seen. Dinner was served. Music hummed. Nora made Aubrey laugh so hard she wiped tears from her eyes. Halfway through the meal, the lights dimmed. The MC stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the traditional father-daughter dance." A wave of murmurs rippled across the hall. People looked at Robert. Then at Aubrey. Then quickly looked away. Aubrey's throat tightened. She hadn't expected to dance, but she hadn't expected to be reminded she couldn't either. Robert hesitated. His face tightened with conflict. He didn't move toward her. He didn't even look at her directly. And the silence, the humiliating, crushing silence, burned in her chest. Evan stood up. He didn't even think. He just acted. "Aubrey," he said gently, stepping toward her, "every daughter deserves a dance." The room froze. Aubrey's breath caught. "Evan. I can't." "I know," he said softly. "But we can make our own version." The crowd whispered. Robert stiffened. Aubrey's eyes filled. "You'd really do that?" Evan nodded, offering his hand. "If you'll let me." She let out a trembling breath. "Yes." Evan placed one hand carefully over hers on the armrest, the other on the back of her wheelchair, and guided her onto the dance floor. He moved with gentle, sweeping motions as the music began again, slow, warm, emotional. Aubrey lifted her face. Her eyes glistened under the lights. For the first time in years, she wasn't a burden. She wasn't a shadow. She was part of the moment. The hall grew quiet. Some guests even wiped their eyes. The sincerity was impossible to ignore. Robert watched, jaw clenched, not with anger, but with something deeper. Something painful. Something he'd been hiding. A man who had buried his guilt so deeply, he forgot how to reach his daughter at all. When the song ended, Evan knelt beside Aubrey's chair. "You deserved that dance," he said softly. Aubrey wiped her tears. "You have no idea what that meant to me." Robert approached slowly. Carefully. He looked at Evan first, then at his daughter. "Aubrey," he whispered, voice breaking, "I'm sorry." Aubrey froze. She had waited 2 years to hear those words. "I was afraid," Robert continued. "Afraid of facing what happened. Afraid of failing you again. And instead of helping, I pushed you into the background. You deserved better." Aubrey's lips trembled. "Dad. I just wanted you to see me." Robert knelt beside her, something that stunned the entire room. "I see you now. And I want to do better. If you'll let me." Aubrey nodded through tears. Robert turned to Evan. "Thank you, for giving my daughter what I couldn't." Evan shook his hand. She deserved a moment that was hers. As guests resumed dancing, Nora hugged Aubrey tightly. "You're my favorite person here," she declared. Aubrey laughed, heart full for the first time in years. "You might be mine too." When the night ended, Evan walked beside Aubrey as Robert pushed her wheelchair gently toward the exit, not out of obligation, but out of love. Aubrey looked between them, her heart warm. For the first time in a long time. She didn't feel invisible. She felt chosen. Seen. Whole. All because a single dad had the courage to speak when no one else dared.